I don't like that angle. I like this one.
Everybody wanted to meet Michael Jackson. That was the dream. The fantasy. The story people told themselves for years. Fans imagined it. Celebrities imagined it. Politicians, athletes, actors, musicians, people who had already achieved everything they once thought impossible still found themselves wondering what it would be like to stand in the same room as the most famous human being on Earth.
Did you ever get to meet Bubbles?
You know, I met Bubbles, but Bubbles, Michael had like a real zoo at his house. The giraffes was walking around and like, ugh. It was huge. Bubbles was in a cage, like tripping, like, ah! And Michael's like, don't go near the cage.
They imagined the moment would feel magical. They imagined they would know exactly what to say. They imagined they would shake his hand, exchange a few words, maybe tell him how much his work meant to them. In their minds, the encounter was simple, predictable, human. But that fantasy had one major problem. Almost nobody who actually met Michael Jackson reacted the way they thought they would.
I said, Mike, I'm gonna come pick you up and we can go to church. Tell anybody you was going to church. Oh no, I want it to be a secret. We get down, people all on the side. Where, Michael, I'm going, what the hell? Mike, I thought I told you, ain't tell nobody. I never opened my mouth. This ass rolled the window down. People was reaching in there, tearing his clothes off. I said, roll your window up. Shut up all that whining.
Something happened. Something strange. Something that repeated itself so consistently that it stopped looking like coincidence and started looking like a pattern. Grown adults forgot how to speak. Famous people lost their confidence. Professional entertainers who spent their entire lives commanding attention suddenly became nervous teenagers again. And the strangest part was that Michael himself seemed completely aware of it.
Look. The police pulled him out. The Jackson Dons. He been doing all my. Every time he starts, the police pull him out. Every time. He could never get on a roll.
There are people who walk into a room and change the temperature.
He watched it happen constantly. He watched people freeze in front of him. He watched them stumble through sentences. He watched them laugh at things that weren't funny simply because they didn't know what else to do. And somewhere behind that soft voice and those sunglasses, he seemed endlessly amused by the entire thing.
Hard because Michael got to sneak in the movie right before it starts. So Michael coming in like with a ninja suit on, he's hiding, and all of a sudden I'm sitting there, well, where's Michael? And then I turn around, he's like, hey Chris. I'm like, oh man, how long you been here?
About 5 minutes. I'm sorry.
Chris Tucker once described experiences with Michael that sounded less like hanging out with a celebrity and more like surviving a social experiment. They would try to do ordinary things. Go shopping. Watch a movie. Visit public places. Simple activities. Activities that every person on Earth performs without thinking. Yet the moment Michael entered the equation, normality collapsed. Crowds appeared from nowhere. Security scrambled. Employees panicked. Plans disintegrated. What should have been routine became chaos.
Security bring us popcorn and stuff, you know, I'm like, he's trying to hide, you know.
Right.
Here you go, Mr. Jackson.
You know?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we watching the movie, he's the loudest person in there.
Really?
You know? Yeah, he's watching the movie like, hee. I said, Michael, would you shut up for people see you?
I'm sorry, it was funny, Chris.
Yeah.
And what fascinated people most wasn't the reaction of fans. It was Michael's reaction. Because while everyone else lost control of the situation, Michael often appeared to be the calmest person present. As if he had seen this movie 1,000 times before. As if he already knew exactly how the story would end. And maybe he did. Because unlike everyone around him, Michael had spent his entire life living inside that reality. The people meeting him were experiencing it for the first time. Michael was experiencing it for the 10,000th. And that difference may explain why every encounter felt so strange. Because while everyone else was reacting to Michael Jackson the legend,
I was just complimenting a flat screen TV he had, and he gave it to me. I was like, Michael, I didn't want the TV. But then the black came out of me. I started liking everything after that. I said, Mike, I like that Rolls Royce. That's a bad Rolls Royce. Not the old one, the new Rolls Royce, right there. He was like, you like it, Chris? I said, yeah, I like it. He said, you sure you like it? I said, yeah, I like it. He said, well, you better go buy one, because I ain't giving you my Rolls.
Michael himself was simply trying to get through another day. Yet the deeper people looked, the stranger the pattern became. Because the people who walked away from these encounters weren't just overwhelmed. Many of them left feeling like they had met someone completely different from the person they expected to find. That may be the most misunderstood thing about Michael Jackson. People assumed his greatest impact came from his performances. The records, the concerts, the music videos that changed popular culture forever. But the people who actually spent time around him often tell a different story. They talk about surprises, about contradictions, about moments that didn't fit the image the world had created.
Can we just do it again without the negative saying that you don't like the tour? Just
I don't like it.
Standing up though, I don't know.
I go through hell touring. I'll make it positive then.
Yeah, it's just
Action, Michael.
I love the tour. You guys messed up.
Because the Michael they met wasn't always the Michael they expected. They expected confidence. They found shyness. They expected a larger-than-life superstar. They found someone who could become fascinated by the smallest details. They expected someone consumed by fame. They found someone endlessly curious about ordinary experiences he never had the chance to enjoy. This is where the story becomes less about celebrity and more about isolation. Because fame didn't simply make Michael famous. It separated him from reality long before he understood what reality was supposed to feel like. Most people spend childhood learning how the world works. They learn social rules. They learn routines. They learn normal experiences through repetition. Michael never received that education in the traditional sense. While other children were discovering life, Michael was performing for audiences. While other teenagers worried about school dances, Michael was becoming a global phenomenon. Entire sections of ordinary human development happened somewhere beyond glass. Visible but unreachable. And the people around him eventually began noticing the consequences. Michael approached normal experiences with the excitement of someone discovering them for the first time. Going to a store wasn't routine. It was an adventure. Visiting a theme park wasn't a casual outing. It was an opportunity. Sitting in a movie theater wasn't something he took for granted. It was something he genuinely treasured. The irony is that many people believed Michael possessed everything: wealth, fame, success, influence. Yet the thing he seemed to value most was access to experiences other people barely noticed. And when people encountered that side of him, it changed the way they viewed him forever. Because suddenly the mythology disappeared. Suddenly the icon became a person. A person who had sacrificed pieces of a normal life long before he was old enough to understand what those sacrifices meant. A person who still carried genuine excitement toward things the rest of the world had stopped appreciating years ago. And perhaps that is why meeting Michael felt so disorienting. People arrived expecting to meet a legend. Instead, they often encountered someone whose humanity felt unexpectedly visible. Someone whose curiosity remained intact despite everything fame had taken from him. And that realization created a completely different kind of impact. One that people rarely forgot long after the encounter ended. The stories become even stranger when you realize that Michael Jackson didn't just affect fans. He affected people who should have been immune to celebrity. Actors who spent decades in Hollywood. Musicians who filled stadiums themselves. Comedians capable of controlling entire audiences with nothing but a microphone and confidence. On paper, these were individuals who had already experienced fame. They understood attention. They understood pressure. They understood what it felt like to have people recognize them in public. Yet the moment Michael entered the room, those experiences suddenly seemed irrelevant. It was as if there were levels to fame, and Michael existed on a level nobody else had ever reached. People often describe a strange tension before meeting him. Excitement mixed with anxiety. Anticipation mixed with disbelief. They knew they were about to meet Michael Jackson, but their brains struggled to process what that actually meant. Because Michael wasn't merely a celebrity. He was a reference point. A cultural landmark. Someone whose presence had existed in the background of people's lives for so long that he stopped feeling like a real person and started feeling like a permanent feature of reality. Then the meeting would happen. And reality would return all at once. Suddenly, the larger-than-life figure became someone standing directly in front of them. Someone speaking softly. Someone smiling. Someone asking questions. And that's when everything usually fell apart. Stories repeatedly describe people forgetting prepared speeches. forgetting introductions, forgetting basic conversational skills. Some became overly formal. Others became awkwardly enthusiastic. Some simply stared. The fascinating part is that Michael rarely seemed uncomfortable with any of it. If anything, he appeared to understand exactly what was happening. He understood that people weren't reacting to him as a person. They were reacting to years of emotions, memories, and expectations attached to his name. Every album they grew up with, every performance they watched, every moment he occupied in their imagination. All of that arrived in the room before he did. And Michael had spent his entire life learning how to navigate that reality. Yet despite experiencing this constantly, he never seemed to become cynical about it. That's what surprised so many people. Fame often creates distance. It encourages skepticism. It teaches public figures to protect themselves emotionally. Michael somehow maintained a remarkable openness. He still engaged, still listened, still seemed genuinely interested in the people around him. And that created an even bigger contradiction. Because the closer people got to Michael Jackson, the harder it became to reconcile the human being they were meeting with the myth they had spent years constructing. Every interaction chipped away at assumptions. Every conversation revealed something unexpected. And by the end, many people realized they had misunderstood him completely. One of the reasons those encounters remained unforgettable is because Michael possessed something that cannot be manufactured. Genuine fascination. Not with fame. Not with power. With people. Friends often described how intensely observant he could be. Michael noticed things. Small reactions. Passing comments. Tiny details most people ignored entirely. He listened carefully. He remembered things. And perhaps because so much of his own life had been spent under observation, he developed an unusual awareness of others. People felt seen around him. Not in the way fans feel seen by celebrities. In the way human beings feel seen by someone who is genuinely paying attention. That quality appears again and again in stories told by those who knew him. Someone mentions liking an item in a store. Weeks later, it appears as a gift. Someone casually references a dream. Michael remembers it long after everyone else forgets. Someone expresses excitement about a particular experience. Michael immediately wants to help make it happen. These weren't grand public gestures designed for headlines. In many cases, nobody would have known about them if the recipients hadn't shared the stories themselves years later. That is what makes them so powerful. They reveal behavior rather than image. Character rather than reputation. And perhaps that's why people struggled so much after meeting him. Because Michael consistently violated expectations. The public narrative surrounding him was often enormous, dramatic, larger than life. The private experiences people described were frequently personal, thoughtful, and surprisingly intimate. Those realities weren't supposed to coexist. Yet they did. The result was a kind of emotional whiplash. People arrived expecting a phenomenon. They left remembering a person. Not because Michael stopped being extraordinary. Because he somehow managed to be extraordinary and deeply human at the same time. And that combination proved almost impossible to process. Especially for individuals who spent years believing they already understood who he was. Looking back, this may be the hidden reason nobody knew how to act around Michael Jackson. It wasn't simply because he was famous. Fame alone doesn't create reactions this consistent. It wasn't because he was talented. Talent alone doesn't make people forget how to speak. The deeper reason may have been that Michael constantly forced people to confront two conflicting realities at once. He was the most recognizable person in the room. Yet he often behaved like the most curious. He was the most famous person in the world. Yet he frequently seemed fascinated by experiences everyone else considered ordinary. And somewhere inside that contradiction existed the version of Michael Jackson that the public almost never saw. The version that left such a lasting impression on the people fortunate enough to encounter him. And the closer those people got, the more they realized the mystery surrounding Michael Jackson wasn't disappearing. It was becoming even harder to explain. The longer you study Michael Jackson's life, the more you begin noticing something unusual. Nearly everyone who met him tells a different story, Yet somehow they all arrive at the same conclusion. They struggle to explain him. Not because they lack the words. Because the experience itself seemed to resist simple explanations. One person remembers the humor. Another remembers the kindness. Someone else remembers the childlike excitement. Others remember the shyness, the generosity, the strange combination of confidence and vulnerability that appeared to exist simultaneously. The details change. The conclusion doesn't. People walked away feeling like they had encountered someone entirely unlike the person they expected to find. And perhaps that's because Michael spent his entire life trapped between two identities. There was Michael Jackson, the global phenomenon. The symbol. The headline. The cultural force powerful enough to stop traffic and shut down cities. Then there was Michael Jackson, the person. The individual who still wanted experiences most people stopped appreciating long ago. The individual who could become fascinated by simple moments. The individual who never seemed entirely comfortable inside the mythology surrounding him. Imagine carrying that contradiction every day of your life. Imagine entering a room knowing people have already formed opinions about you before you speak a single word. Imagine understanding that for many people, meeting you represents the culmination of years of expectations, memories, and emotions. Most individuals would eventually build walls. Most would become distant, defensive, careful. Michael often appeared to do the opposite. He continued reaching outward, continued connecting, continued offering pieces of himself despite living under a microscope few human beings could comprehend. That decision may be one of the most underrated aspects of his character. Because openness becomes increasingly difficult after years of scrutiny. Yet story after story suggests Michael never entirely lost that instinct. He never stopped being curious about people. Never stopped looking for joy in unexpected places. Never stopped behaving like someone searching for experiences rather than protecting a reputation. And that may be why the encounters remained so powerful. People arrived expecting to meet a monument. Instead, they met someone still trying to experience life despite carrying a level of fame that should have made that impossible. Somewhere inside that contradiction existed the real source of his impact. Not the celebrity. Not the performer. The person. And once people saw that person, they never looked at him the same way again. Maybe that's why the world still talks about Michael Jackson the way it does. Decades have passed. Entire generations have grown up after the height of his fame. Yet the stories continue circulating. Not just stories about records or awards or performances. Stories about encounters. Stories about moments. Stories about what it felt like to stand near him and experience something difficult to describe. Because in the end, the most remarkable thing about Michael Jackson wasn't what he accomplished. It was what he triggered in other people. Somehow, merely being present altered behavior. Confident people became nervous. Reserved people became emotional. Skeptical people became believers. And perhaps the reason had less to do with fame than anyone realized. Fame can attract attention. Fame can create excitement. Fame can generate admiration. But fame alone doesn't create the reaction Michael consistently produced. The deeper reaction came from contrast. People expected one thing and discovered another. They expected distance and found warmth. They expected mythology and found humanity. They expected someone unreachable and discovered someone surprisingly relatable beneath the layers of celebrity. That emotional collision stayed with people. It became the story they told years later. Not because Michael demanded attention. Because he challenged assumptions. Every encounter forced people to reconsider what they thought they knew. And maybe that's the hidden answer to the question that follows him even now. Nobody knew how to act around Michael Jackson because nobody knew which version they were about to meet. The icon from history books. The performer who changed music forever. The shy observer quietly watching the room. The curious soul fascinated by ordinary experiences. The generous friend. The mischievous prankster. The dreamer who never fully stopped seeing wonder where everyone else saw routine. All of those people existed inside the same individual. And when others encountered that reality, their expectations simply couldn't keep up. They froze. They laughed. They stumbled through conversations. They forgot how to behave normally because nothing about the experience felt normal. Michael Jackson didn't just occupy space. He altered it. Not through force. Not through power. Through presence. Through a uniqueness so complete that people still struggle to describe it accurately years later. And perhaps that's the most fitting legacy imaginable. Not that the world remembers Michael Jackson. It's that the world still isn't entirely sure how to explain what it felt like when he was here.